Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of All in All with Alex podcast. I'm your host, of course, Alex, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Greg Lawrence.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me today.
Yes, sir, no problem. I definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on today. Um, so, can you give the people a quick little background about yourself before we jump into it?
Yeah, I am a transformational coach. I work with people on resolving issues in their life, helping them on their path of personal and spiritual development. I'm a certified psychedelic integration coach. That's about half the work that I do, and that's actually how I started off. And in that work, I help people prepare for psychedelic experiences, like setting intentions and what kind of things might or might not happen, what to do based on what they're looking for. And afterwards, I help people to take the lessons or theme from their experience. There's always a lesson in the psychedelic experience,
Mhm.
and help them pick out what they want from that and somehow implement in their daily lives. I'm also a certified life coach. I'm an NLP Master Practitioner, and I'm an HNLP certified coach. I've been full-time coach for about 4 years now. I used to be a small business owner before that.
Okay, okay. Um, so, for some people that don't really understand, can you break down some of those acronyms like the NLP and HNLP, just so they can kind of understand what it is?
NLP is neuro linguistic programming. That was developed in the 70s. And it started off as a way to help therapists be more effective, like a way to use language when you're working with people.
Okay.
And as time went on and they were working with people, they also came up with a lot of like patterns and different things that you could use to help people. NLP is what some people have called the study of subjective human experience. So for years, I was fascinated. I wanted to know what happens in between the time something happens out here and some behavior I don't especially like pops out of me. Like what
Mhm.
happened in between? And NLP explained all that for me.
Okay.
So HNLP is humanistic neurolinguistic psychology. That was developed by a guy named John Oberdorf in the 80s. I studied extensively with John still. And that is a little bit beyond NLP. It's very much about counseling and working people through their problems. Once again, with a lot of different patterns and things that we can use to help people. But they're both about counseling and change work.
Okay. Okay. So, can you explain the connection between neuroscience and personal growth in your coaching methodology?
Oh, man. So I think one of the things that we have to really start looking at and figuring it out is the role of our brain in our everyday life.
Mhm.
Because really, as far as just being an organ, let's forget about the fact that our mind interfaces with our brain, but our brain as an organ
Mhm.
isn't much different than this. It's a computer. And this is actually a more powerful computer than the one that sent men to the moon in the 60s and brought them back. It's a powerful computer, but the major difference between this computer and this one is that every line of code that goes into this thing is checked and rechecked to make sure that it's what we need to get a particular output. I
Mhm.
mean, if I go look at the weather today, it's going to check sensors and things in a particular area. It's going to know where I am. It's going to give me an idea of what the weather is.
Mhm.
This computer spends years before anybody is able to actually intervene and say, hey, this is what I think, or, that's what I want. There are a couple of years where we don't even know we're separate from anybody else. And the whole time we're taking in everything around us, including other people's opinions, the things that how we see people interacting, things happening in the world. We take all of this in as in its fact. And then for a few more years, we have the imprint period where we're looking around and we're learning how to operate in the world by watching other people and what they do. And at some point, we become our own person. And when we do, one of the first things we do is start listening to this as if it's smart. Well, for all the thinking they do, brains are not really very smart. They're computers. And when you put things into them, they spit things out. There's a lot of stuff that's been put into our brains that doesn't give us the outputs that we want. But since this is where we think, we're under the impression that this thing is really smart, we need to listen to it. I mean, if you think about it, our thoughts are the things that really keep us down sometimes. And our brain is really happy to help with that a lot of the times. It says things and does things. I mean, if you look at like The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, he said if you had a roommate or a person you knew who was as wrong as your brain, was as negative, who said the kind of things about you that your brain says, who changed its mind so capriciously, you'd probably tell that person, get away from me.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't want anything to do with you. You're a disaster waiting to happen. But our brains we take very seriously.
Mhm.
So neuroscience explains a lot of things about how those things operate and what we can do. Like, for instance, in the world of psychedelics, there's a lot of talk of psychedelics downregulating the default mode network. The default mode network is a region of our brain that comes online when we're kind of on autopilot. You know, in the 80s, they were doing some studies in fMRI machines and telling people to do certain tasks. And then they'd say, all right, you can take a break now. And they noticed that when they said that, the same region of the brain would light up every time. And they identified the default mode network. Now, when you are driving the same path to work that you've driven 50 times, the default mode network's probably on. You're thinking about something else. The default mode network is also very self-referential, biographical. It's very critical and chattery. It's the one that's going where we're being critical of ourselves and others. Now, on the other hand, if you are paying attention to something, like if I'm driving on a road and it's dark and it's raining and it's curving and it's on a mountain, I've never been there, I am paying attention to what I'm doing. The default mode network is off because the task positive network is on. The task positive network and default mode network can't be on at the same time. In order for the task positive network to be on, all I have to do is focus my attention on something. One way of focusing my attention on something is through mindfulness. And there is a stripped down of definition of mindfulness by Ellen Langer, who is a Harvard psychology professor. She was the first female to be tenured in psychology in Harvard. She'd been writing about mindfulness since the 70s.
Oh, wow.
She says mindfulness is the process of noticing things. That's it. If you are noticing things, you are being mindful and you're not on autopilot. And the task positive network is lit up and the default mode network is on, and you are actually living your life and taking in information and not thinking about what happened years ago or what's going to happen a year from now. So neuroscience can clue us into how things work and give us an idea to how to take some of the tools that we have around us that we've heard so much about and how to apply those in a way that keeps us thinking about things in a way that's helpful to us and not just plaguing us with negative thought.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I like the way you break it down, so you break it down that way anybody should be able to understand exactly, the way you articulate it. So
this stuff has been way too complicated for way too long. I mean, just mindfulness alone. When you say mindfulness, people glaze over, and I did too, because you start thinking about body scans or breathing, or you say, try to be present, and people say, how do I be present? It's not an easy thing to do, but if you break it down to what Ellen Langer did and said, you just have to notice things. I mean, I had this cut for years, and at some point I sat there and I looked at this graphic in great detail, which I hadn't done before. That's me noticing things.
Mm-hmm.
Langer also talks about noticing what's new and different, taking time every day to notice what's new and different, even if it's just new to you and that you hadn't looked closely at it. I have 2 ceiling fans in here. That one's got 4 blades. This one has 5. That one's from Hampton Bay. This is a no name. That one has 4 little bell things. This has one single thing with lights in it. I didn't know that months ago because I saw these things every day, but I never looked closely at them and took them in.
Right. You knew they were there, but you never looked at the detail. Basically.
I could have told you I had 2 ceiling fans, but if you asked me what color they were, I'm pretty sure they were brown. That was about it.
Yeah. Right. So how do you balance how do you balance the psychological and spiritual aspects of growth in your coaching sessions?
That depends on the individual. Some people are really focused on spirituality, and some people are really, to me, one leads to the other. If you're on a spiritual path, being tied up in things. So I guess at this point I should talk about what triggers are. Like when something happens, this is what I wanted to find out about for years. When something happens and all of a sudden I don't like the feeling that I have or the thing that I said to somebody. Well, many times, often when we're small, something happens that we don't like and we get a bad feeling in our body. And let's make no mistake, there's no such thing as an emotion you can feel with your brain. Your brain is incapable of feeling emotions. Your brain's incapable of feeling physical pain even. It has no pain receptors. They stick probes into people's brains to try to find out what's happening. They can't feel it when they do that. They don't have anesthesia. They don't need it. Your brain can't feel. That's why they're called feelings, not thinkings. Every emotion you feel is a sensation or a combination of sensations in your body. So something happens, I get a bad feeling in my body, and those 2 things are fused together in my nervous system. So that every time that person does that thing, I get that feeling in my body. Mm-hmm. Then my nervous system starts generalizing and saying, this is kind of like that, so you should have that same feeling. And this is kind of like that, so you should have that same feeling. And the next thing you know, a certain tone of voice or look on someone's face or a particular situation gives me a bad feeling. And now I have social anxiety, or I'm depressed in a certain way, or I have this blanket problem that came from individual things happening over and over, and my nervous system sort of generalizing out to different areas. So when this happens, I am not in control. The unconscious mind is a half second ahead of the conscious mind. So if something's triggered in you, like it's wired into your nervous system and it happens, you don't know what's happening until you're on the other side saying, oh, that doesn't feel good. It's not like you can stop it. Like that person's got a look on their face. I think I won't have that feeling. It happens before you can think any conscious thoughts.
Right.
So that's one of the things that's very good about NLP and HNLP is we can unhook some of those things, and we can start training the brain to start generalizing and realizing that that's not a problem like you thought. And see, that's not either, and that's not either. And when you do that, then you're more able to be present, and you're more able to be in your surroundings, and you're more able to connect with yourself psychologically or spiritually. If you're on a spiritual path and you keep getting triggered by things, that is getting in your way. So to me, one leads to the other. All this mechanical neuroscience, neurology, NLP, psychology, all of this stuff to me is a way of getting to the spiritual aspect of my life. I want to get this stuff out of the way and kind of be cleared out.
Okay.
I see them as two sides of the same coin.
Gotcha. So can you share a success story of a client who experienced significant transformation through your coaching?
Well, a lot of people, we've worked on things. I mean, what I do is a lot of kind of change work. So that someone comes to me and they say, I have this bad feeling when this happens. And through different processes or patterns and things, we can make it to where by the end of the session, you say, what happens when you think of that thing? And they say, it's just not a big deal anymore. We can go back to traumatic memories and we can take the edge off of that so that people can look back and not be triggered, not be bothered by the thing that they're looking at, this thing that happened to them years ago. And that's happened time and time again. That's one of the major reasons that I got really involved in NLP and HNLP, because that's what that does. I got tired of kind of coaching by giving advice or things like that. I wanted to do something that would help people actually change their situation when they weren't in control the way that they wanted to be.
Okay. So let's say, sorry about that. I lost my location. So what are some common misconceptions about transformational coaching that you would like to address?
Well, I think a lot of people think that coaching consists of advice primarily. And when you realize that a lot of the things that have a hold of us when we're not in control are happening at the subconscious level, it's kind of strange that a lot of coaching programs and certifications and things like that concentrate on interventions that are happening at the conscious level, on things like advice and reframing and things like that. So a lot of people think that a coach is going to tell them what to do or how to solve their problem, when really that solution is in the client already. I mean, when I work with people, I try to get them to a place where they can call on the resources that they have within themselves so that they're coming up with a solution. Right. A lot of coaches are frustrated because they feel like people don't want to do the work, or they seem like they feel really good in the session, but then when they're not there, they go back to the old behaviors. Well, a lot of that's because it's things that make sense that the coach is telling the person, and they can reasonably say, yeah, I should be doing that, or you're right, that is the way things should be going. But then when they're not in that environment anymore and that subconscious thing happens, then they're relapsing. They feel really bad. So transformational coaching to me is about helping clients get in touch with the resources that they have inside of themselves already.
Okay. That's a good way to explain it. So with that, how are you able to measure progress or success in your coaching practice?
Well, that's completely up to the client. I usually tell people if they're not sure, like they don't know if this is for them, what's a goal you have? What do you want? I mean, when people start, we always have an overarching goal. What's your big goal in coming to coaching? And every time we have a session, we're going to compare it to that goal. Is that getting you closer to that big goal? I'm also going to ask everybody, ask a person every session, just about ask people, was this helpful today? How was it helpful? What did it do for you? And let the person measure the progress themselves. But usually, if someone's had 2 or 3 sessions, they can start to see a difference in themselves, because to me, coaching is also about helping people train their brains and their nervous systems to respond to the world differently, not just on individual things, but train them that their language and their thinking and the pictures that they make in their head and the things that they think to themselves have a direct effect on the way they carry themselves in the world and the state that they might be in at any particular time.
Okay. So what advice would you give someone who's considering working with a transformational coach?
Well, I think you should always find someone who fits with you. I think you should find someone who you feel like you're on even footing with. Like, I can work with this person. I think you find someone who understands what you're saying when you're talking, but also asks a lot of questions. I think some of the best coaching is done when people are asking people what's happening with them, or how does that feel to them, or what do they think would happen if X given Y.
Okay. Can you discuss the importance of integration and personal growth, especially after transformative experiences?
Well, I can talk about that in the context of psychedelic experiences, because I do psychedelic integration work.
That works.
So a lot of times when people have that experience, and this really goes with any just peak experience or transformational experience, you might have some epiphany about how you want your life to be different. But the problem is, well, let's just say I'm right-handed. Now, when people talk about, after a psychedelic experience, they talk about new neural pathways. Well, if I want to create a new neural pathway, I have to put the pen in my left hand and start to write. And now 2 things have been connected in my brain: writing and left hand. And those will keep connecting as long as I do this. But at first, when I start doing it, like right now, that feels really awkward. It feels really uncomfortable. And I really want to put the pen in my right hand because I know I can get that done. So your brain likes to make you uncomfortable when you go about the process of changing, because our brains are still stuck in 15,000 years ago, when there was going to be a famine and there wasn't much food and it was winter, and you really shouldn't waste a calorie like changing any kind of energy into a new thing. Just keep doing what you were doing and let energy go the way that it always went. It still thinks that way. So it makes you very uncomfortable when you change. So a lot of times people are waiting until they feel like doing something that's different in their lives. But it's usually the other way around, really. You have to just keep doing the thing until, eventually this writing will become comfortable for me. But not after a lot of struggle and a lot of frustration, a lot of discomfort, and a lot of really bad writing, like I'm in kindergarten for a while. Eventually become comfortable, but it'll take a while. And I'll have to be the grown-up and make myself do that. I saw a TED Talk recently with a woman who said something to the effect like, you are your parents now. There's going to be shit that you don't want to do in your life, and you're the only one who can tell yourself to do that now. No one's going to tell you to do it, and you're always going to have things you don't want to do, and you're going to have to be the one to tell yourself to do it. And if you're waiting until you feel like doing it, you're going to be just like when you were a kid. It's not going to get done until somebody makes you.
Yeah.
So a lot of times in integration, what we have to do is we have to make some change or shift. It can be as simple as making the bed in the morning. It can be setting a boundary. It can be changing some dynamic in a relationship. It could have to do with your career. It could have to do with getting your finances in order. There are a million things that can come up, but it's usually going to come down to you doing something differently for a while, and that being a little bit uncomfortable and feeling a little bit forced. Integration is taking the ideas or the insights that you got from a particular experience and actually putting that into your life through the process of making a change that often feels awkward, forced, or uncomfortable.
Okay. So so a lot of that is kind of like, retraining your brain almost.
Absolutely, retraining your brain. That's one thing that we're in coaching I do. We're always retraining your brain, because your brain thinks, that it knows a lot more than it does. But your brain will actually, unless you're talking about, like some adding up a sum or something, your brain doesn't like to say, I don't know. And that's really not a good place to start from, because it will actually make stuff up. So here's an example. There is a surgical procedure that's done sometimes when people have treatment-resistant seizure disorders. And in this procedure, they'll sever the corpus callosum. That's the part of the brain that connects the right and left hemispheres of the brain. When they do that, it often stops people from having seizures and they appear to function completely normally. However, the right side of your brain is responsible for feeling. It can smell, touch, hear, see, all of these things and feel physical feelings, but it can't communicate. The left side of your brain can communicate, but it can't do any of those other things. It just talks a lot. And it kind of guesses at what's going on the right side. Well, when you sever this thing, the corpus callosum, and you show people information on the right side through their right eye, the left side doesn't know that it's seen that, and vice versa. So with people who've had that procedure, they took one person, they showed him pictures with his left eye. They showed him like a chicken foot. And with his right eye, they showed him a snowy day. And then they said, open your eyes and show us some pictures that have to do with what you just saw. And he picked a chicken and a snow shovel. And they said, what does a snow shovel have to do with the chicken? Now, he doesn't know that he saw a picture of the snowy day because it was on the right side. But his left side, which has to communicate, just immediately says, well, if you have chickens, you have to shovel out the chicken coop.
Mm.
Another guy, they showed his right side instructions that said stand up and walk. And when he stood up, one of the researchers said, why did you stand up? Now, he doesn't know he saw those instructions because now it's the left side communicating. It doesn't know he saw that information, but it just immediately says, oh, I was thirsty, so I'm going to go get a drink of water.
Mm.
And what they proved through these experiments again and again and again is that if your brain doesn't know why you're doing something, it will absolutely make something up.
Mm.
So on top of the fact that it's highly critical of us, more critical of us than other people most of the time, on top of the fact that it's often wrong, that it changes its mind, that's kind of clouded with all these different perceptions based on things that happened to us in the past, it also makes things up sometimes. So one of the things that we're doing when we retrain our brain is remembering not to listen to our brain and believe it all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, thoughts should be examined and considered extensively because there's a lot of garbage in there that we just accept as fact coming out.
Yeah, that's yeah. It makes me do a lot of thinking now. But not too much. I don't want to listen to my brain.
Yeah.
So would you say you know, a lot of this, so how do you feel that mindset, what role does mindset play in the personal transformation? Because I mean, it kind of seems like, you know, retraining your brain and then whatever mindset that you currently have or mindset that you're trying to reach is some of the biggest factors in personal transformation.
Well, yeah, and mindset's a big part of this stuff. It's one of the reasons that if you get up in the morning and you don't feel good, you are thinking something that is making you not feel good. I mean, you might be uncomfortable physically, but if you're just thinking, oh, you know, I'm not too excited about the day, I don't know what's going to happen, you're doing something internally. You might be looking at a picture, you might be thinking a certain thought, you might be reliving something that happened before, but you know, that is you actively doing something that's creating this state. So mindset's all a part of this. So what we do with our brain, how we look at our thoughts, whether or not we're on autopilot and going back into things from the past and being self-critical, are all part of mindset. If I'm being mindful, if I'm noticing things, if I'm trying to be here as much as I can, if I'm examining my thoughts, if I'm working on things so that I'm not triggered as much, I have much more control over my mind and my mindset because my mind is pretty clear, but my brain is constantly running interference with like automatic programs that are outdated that I don't need anymore. All these bad reactions I have to things were things that at one time served me well in at least one context. I mean, they were very helpful, but they no longer are now. They're not serving me like they're used to. So a lot of times I'm looking for what works and trying to like let the things that don't work just become obsolete by not using them.
Okay. So do you happen to have maybe some practical tips for maintaining personal growth outside of your coaching sessions that you know that you're able to share for anybody?
Well, one of the first things I'd recommend people do, probably the first thing I tell every client is pay attention to your body, feelings in your body. Because every time that you feel less than good, there is a sensation in your body that is going to be somewhat uncomfortable. And that discomfort can range from a little bit uncomfortable to very, very uncomfortable. What happens is We feel some discomfort in our bodies. Our brain immediately cuts it off and starts us thinking, trying to solve the problem of these unpleasant feelings that we can no longer feel.
Mm-hmm.
So we start looking outside. But really, one of the best things you can do is just to realize anytime I'm other than good, there's some discomfort in my body. And I don't need to know where that is exactly, or what size or shape or texture or color. Just be aware that there is some discomfort in my body. And if you do that for a week, you're probably going to be very surprised the amount of times that there's discomfort in your body that you've been sort of masking before by letting your brain cut it off.
That's a good idea. So what do you feel are some of your biggest challenges that you face as a transformational coach?
I don't know. I actually love my job. I like working with people. I like the challenge of meeting people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think continued growth.
Okay.
Something I'm always looking at, but I don't have a lot of challenges as a coach. I love what I do.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. So let's see. So can you I'm gonna go with that question. So what are your thoughts on the future of transformational coaching and personal development?
Well, personal development is also always going to be a thing. I don't know what the future of coaching is. There are all these ads right now, as there always are, saying coaching is dead and there's no such thing as one-on-one coaching anymore, and all these programs to help people get 50 new clients every week, which I don't think you need if you're not losing clients constantly. So
Right.
I don't know what the future of coaching is, but I know there's an awful lot of people selling things to coaches right now. And there are a lot of coaching programs. I think that there's going to come a point where the good coaches are going to be separated out from the rest of them. There are a lot of programs right now that just rush people through coaching programs and don't teach them what to actually do when a client sits down with them and tells them, my boss makes me anxious every day. They don't know where to go with that.
Okay. So so before we get out of here, can you let people know how they can go about hiring you as a personal development coach, or where they can get in contact with you, whether it's your website or whatever information you have to share with them?
Yeah, my website's psychedelicintegrationspecialist.com.
Okay.
And I'm Greg Lawrence on Facebook, Psychedelic Integration on Instagram. And email is greg@psychedelicintegrationspecialist.com.
Okay. Yeah, and you send me all that. I'll make sure I put it in the description of the the YouTube video, and then of on the Spotify and all that. I'll put it in the show notes so that way they can be able to just easily get in contact with you and use your services. So
Cool.
So is there anything else that you want to tell the audience before we get out of here? Because you pretty much ran through my questions that I had, and some of them kind of overlapped. So
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Okay. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to come out here and bless my audience with your knowledge, and maybe somebody will reach out to you, and you'll be able to help them get through certain things they're dealing with in their life as well. So
Always happy to talk to people.
Oh yes. So everybody watching, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for watching. You guys just watched another episode of All in All with Alex, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Later.